All right, we're back here at Moment Machine, and we're degreeing the cam on the 2800 V6 right now. So I got it all mocked up, and I've got the dial indicator on the lifter. I've got the piston in there too. We might look at some piston movements and where the piston actually is when some of the valve events are occurring. So anyway, the cam that we got is the ISKI cam, and supposed to be 226 at 50. It's a little smaller than that. When they ground it, it looks like they had a little clearance between the follower wheel and the master, but it's okay. You know, we can always alter the valve lash a little bit to get it back. But anyway, I just thought I would show you guys a little bit of cam degreeing and what you're doing. But and I do have a cam degreeing video on the Y block thing, so you guys can look at some of that for extra information. But you know, the basics of cam degreeing is you are looking for valve events in crank degrees. So, and then you know, when you put the degree wheel on the crank, and then you've got to balance to the piston, make sure that when the piston's at TDC, the degree wheel reads 0. And the fast way to do that is to, you got to jockey the wire around a little bit, but you'll have an indicator on the piston. And then if you move the piston down a certain amount, say 100 thousandths, it's saying you rock it one way and it reads 20 degrees. When you go the other way, it better be the same amount of degrees. And that's how you balance, and you know that the degree wheel is true to the crankshaft. And then you move over and you'll actually be checking the lift on the cam, so you can see that we have the indicator on the push rod that's going to the lifter. So basically what we do is, when you look at your duration specs, they're at a certain lift. And a lot of times the cams, you know, they'll give you, oh, well, what's the duration at 50? And some of you guys are probably like, well, what does that mean? So what it means is, if you, right now, you can see, well, you can't see it, but you can see the gear. I'm moving the engine around and the valve is closed. So if I slowly move the engine, I'm moving the engine. Oh, there it went. Okay. So you're going to see it moving, and when it gets to 50 thousandths of an inch, we're going to take our opening number from right there. And what we got was 5.5 degrees before top dead center. So what that means is that the piston isn't all the way to the top. It's 5.5 degrees before, but it's really close. So then we're also taking, we're checking the cam at 200. So we wrote down our 50 number, and then we go to 100, 150, and then we go to 200. And that occurred 41 degrees after top center. So the piston went up to top and then slightly went past top. And that's about where the piston is at 200 tappet lift. So then we went ahead and we checked, just for grins, what our full lobe lift was, and it was 293. And so to get our actual closing numbers and keep going, we wind down. So now we're at 200 on the closing side. We went up and over the nose and back down to 200. So that happened 172 degrees after top dead center. And then we go down to 100 and back down to 50. So the valve's almost closed at 50 thousandths, and we got our 218.5 degrees after top center. Now, when you look at the degree wheel, you can see that this is 180, and this would be the bottom of the stroke. So we went from the top of the stroke to the bottom. And this wheel is counting down in crank degrees as if you were the amount of degrees it would take to get back to the top. But because I'm trying to figure out how big the cam is in total, you know, I'm not looking at, say, crank degrees in relationship to piston movement. Right now I'm trying to figure out how big a camshaft is. So instead of counting down, I'm going to go 180, that's going to be 190, 200, 210, 218 and a half. So we have the 218 and a half number, and then because the opening happened 5.5 degrees before, we got to add it to. So 218.5 was our closing, and our opening happened 5.5 degrees before. So it's a total of 224.50. And at 200, it's the same thing. Our closing number was 172. But because the opening number happened after top dead center, we're minusing that out. And it's 131 at 200. So to get down, you take the 131 and you divide it by 2, that's 65 and a half. And then we just added that to our opening number, and we're on a 106 and a half. So I know it seems complicated. It's really not. You're just finding the center line of the lobe in relation to crankshaft degrees. But, you know, one thing we can also look at is, like I said, some of the things that maybe people don't think of or take into consideration is, where is the piston at when some things are happening? So was the compression stroke, and it's firing, and then our exhaust would open, and from there our exhaust would start closing. Okay, and our intake would be opening. So one thing this is just for piece of information, but you can see right now where our piston's at, it's not at the top yet, and the intake valve's actually starting to move into the open position. So you can actually watch, you know, the wheel or the dial indicator, and that's the area they call your overlap, where your exhaust valve would just be closing and your intake valve would be opening. You know, so that's just something for a piece of knowledge, that the actual intake valve opens when the piston hasn't actually reached top dead center yet. And then as it goes down, obviously the intake valve now starts to open pretty fast, and right there, that's about 106 and a half. That's how far down the piston is down the stroke when our valve's at full lift. So that's not that exciting, but it's one thing that I want you to. A lot of people will talk about, oh, do I have enough piston to valve to run a 500 lift cam? Well, it doesn't matter, because look at how far down your piston is. You don't talk about valve clearance and lift, right? Duration is what will typically affect your valve clearance. But as we go down, you can see that here we've now reached bottom dead center. Okay, pretty much right on it. You can see here that the gear's moving, but the piston's not really moving. Okay, but our valve is still open. It is closing, but it's still open. So what happens here is, this is where porting shapes and momentum and energy in the intake tract matter, because the piston is starting to rise and your valve is still open. So you have to generate a fair amount of airspeed, momentum, and inertia in your manifold and your port, or you can just see that the piston will just want to push the air right back out, right? Doesn't do you any good to draw on all that air if you don't have any port speed, and the piston just comes up and pushes it all back out. So that's just kind of something that's interesting. But anyway, the cam looks good. I was actually really happy with our fixed gear set, that the intake center line came out about right where I would put it, about 2.5 degrees advanced. You know, I was kind of figuring that if we had a problem, I was going to have to make a, you know, some kind of offset key or something like that to degree it, but it came out real good. Piers Iski's got their center lines figured out right, and the gear set's made well. So anyway, hope this was fun, hope it was interesting. For Mummert Machine, have a good one. Hit like, subscribe, all that good stuff. See ya.